Starting section 3.3 in solving quadratic equations, and we're going to start by doing that by completing the square. And we're going to do number 4. I'm on page 113 in your book if you want to follow along. So this is in standard form. We know that this is ax squared plus bx plus c, and the way that I like to write it, let's try it here, x squared plus 8x plus, instead of c, I'm just going to put a box here, and I call that the magic number. Okay, so here's the formula. Make sure you write it down. It's b divided by 2 and then quantity squared. So in this case, b is 8. You're going to take 8, you're going to divide that by 2, and that's going to equal 4. Then you're going to take that 4 and you're going to square it, and that turns into 16. And that is going to be your magic number. The reason why it's important is because now you have a trinomial, which is a perfect trinomial square. And if you were to factor it, it's going to be x plus 4 quantity squared. Let's try monitoring progress 5. So I'm going to take b, negative 2. I'm going to divide that by 2, okay, which turns out to be negative 1. I'm going to take that negative 1 and I'm going to square it, and that becomes positive 1. So it's x squared minus 2x plus the magic number, which is 1. So when I factor that, it's going to be x minus 1, and notice it's minus because in here it's minus 1. It's plus because the number you divide by 2 is positive 4, quantity squared. So pause the video, work on monitoring progress 6, and check it in the back of the book. Okay, let's move on to solving equations by completing the square. And I am now on page 114. If you want to follow along. Oops. Page 114, and I'm going to do monitoring progress 7 down here. Okay. X squared minus 4x plus 8 equals 0. You're going to realize that you cannot factor this. There are no two numbers that you can multiply to make positive 8, but then add to negative 4. So we're going to complete the square. X squared minus 4x. I'm going to subtract 8 from both sides, and then I'm going to add the magic number. So it's going to be negative 8 plus the magic number. So remember, in equations, whatever you do on one side, you have to do on the other. Let's do our magic number. We'll do it over here on the side so we can see it. Negative 4 divided by 2, which equals negative 2. I'm going to take that and I'm going to square it, which makes positive 4. So that means that I'm going to add 4 on both sides. So now I can factor this. This is a perfect square trinomial. It's going to be x, right, because this is negative 2, minus 2 quantity squared is going to equal negative 4. And to solve it, we're going to square root both sides. So it's going to be x minus 2 equals, don't forget, because it's an equation, you have to write plus or minus the square root of negative 4. I'm going to add 2 to both sides. Move it up here. So x is going to equal 2 plus or minus the square root of negative 4. I'm going to simplify this imaginary number here. There is a negative on the inside, which becomes I, and then the square root of 4, which becomes 2. So it's the square root, so it's 2 plus or minus 2i. Imaginary roots, which means it does not cross the x-axis. Okay, now we're going to do number 12. I'm going to rewrite it on a new page here. Let's move over to a new page. Oops, and it is number 12. Change my pen here. Number 12. 2x times x minus 2 equals 200. Okay, I'm going to distribute the 2x. 2x squared minus 4x is going to equal 200. Let's just make life a little bit easier. We're going to divide everything by 2. We're going to simplify it. X squared minus 2x equals 100. And since I'm going to use completing the square, I'm going to add the magic number to both sides. Okay, magic number is, here's the formula again, b divided by 2, quantity squared. So b is negative 2 divided by 2, which makes negative 1. Then I'm going to square that, which makes 1. So I'm going to add 1 to both sides. When I factor this, perfect square trinomial will be x minus 1 equals 101. I'm going to square root both sides. X minus 1 pops out. Don't forget the plus and minus. 101. I'm going to add 1 to both sides. X is going to equal 1 plus or minus the square root of 101. Okay, the final part of this is writing the quadratic function in vertex form. This is a little tricky. We're going to need lots of practice. I suggest you watch the video on example 5 in the dynamic textbook, or you can read it in the textbook on page 114. I'm going to do number 8, and then we'll do lots of practice in class. Okay, so we are going to write this in vertex form. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to rewrite the equation, and I'm just going to add the magic number to both sides, but instead this time look what I'm going to do. I'm going to put x squared minus 8x. I'm going to add the magic number here, and then I'm going to scoot over the 18 because you're not going to want to add those together. Okay, so let's find out the magic number here, completing the square. I'll do it on the side. I'm going to take b, I'm going to divide it by 2. That becomes negative 4. And then we're going to square that, which becomes 16. So that means that I'm going to add 16 to both sides. Okay, so now I'm going to factor just this part right here. So it's going to be y plus 16 equals, let's factor it, it's a perfect square trinomial. It's going to be x minus 4 quantity squared plus 18. Well, it's not quite vertex form. If you remember it, we have to get rid of the 16. So we're going to subtract 16 from both sides. And it's going to be y equals x minus 4 quantity squared plus 2. Haha, it is in vertex form. So now it asks you to identify the vertex, and we can easily identify the vertex here. So here is vertex form. And if you remember, the vertex is h and k, but it's always the opposite here. So the vertex is going to be positive 4, and k is always the same, and it's going to be 2. So there are my 2 answers. All right, lots of practice in class. Work on it all day tomorrow. See you then.